Imagine a street in New York, shrouded in fog, where the neon lights flicker like dying stars. The air hums with a low, unnatural whine, and the shadows seem to move when you're not looking. My name is Mr. Nightwraith, a writer of horror stories, and I've seen things that would make your blood run cold. But nothing compares to what I found in the boarding house on Bleecker Street. Have you ever heard footsteps in your home at midnight, even though you live alone? I moved to New York in the fall of 2024, chasing the pulse of the city to fuel my stories. As a horror writer, I needed a place that breathed inspiration, a place with character. The boarding house on Bleecker Street was perfect, or so I thought. It was a crumbling 4-story brownstone, its facade stained with decades of grime. The rent was suspiciously cheap, and the landlady, Mrs. Nguyen, a wiry Vietnamese woman with eyes like polished obsidian, seemed eager to have me. "You write ghost stories?" she asked, her accent thick as she handed me the keys. "Good. This house, it has stories of its own." I laughed it off. A writer's imagination thrives on such cryptic warnings. The house was old, sure, but it had charm. Creaky wooden floors, warped windows that rattled in the wind, and a faint smell of mildew that clung to everything. My room was on the top floor, a small attic space with a slanted ceiling and a single window overlooking the alley. The other tenants were a quiet bunch. A grad student named Claire, a reclusive artist called Marcus, and an elderly man, Mr. Kowalski, who barely left his room. At first it was paradise. I'd sit at my desk, the city's hum filtering through the walls and write tales of vengeful spirits and cursed objects. But after a week, I started to notice things. It began with the cold. My room was always freezing, no matter how high I cranked the radiator. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, my breath visible in the moonlight, feeling like someone had left a window open. But the window was always shut tight. Then there were the sounds. At first, I chalked them up to the house settling. Old buildings groan, after all. But these weren't groans. They were footsteps, slow, deliberate steps pacing the hallway outside my door, always between 2 and 3 a.m. I'd lie in bed, heart pounding, waiting for them to stop. They never did. They'd fade, only to start again an hour later. One night, I mustered the courage to check. I grabbed my phone, its flashlight casting a shaky beam, and crept to the door. The hallway was empty, the air thick with silence. But as I turned back, I saw it, a shadow tall and impossibly thin, flickering at the edge of my vision. I spun around, but it was gone. The air smelled faintly of jasmine, sharp and out of place. I asked Claire about it the next morning. She was a no-nonsense type, always buried in her biology textbooks. "Old houses," she said, sipping her coffee. "They play tricks on you, probably just the pipes." But her eyes darted to the hallway, and I noticed she clutched her mug a little tighter. The footsteps weren't the only thing. Objects in my room started moving. My notebook, always left open on my desk, would be closed and placed on the floor. My pens rolled off the table as if pushed. Once I found a single word scrawled in my notebook, in handwriting that wasn't mine. G, Vietnamese for go. I confronted Mrs. Nguyen. She was in the kitchen, chopping vegetable with a cleaver that glinted under the fluorescent light. "You see things?" she asked, not looking up. "This house, it holds on to people. Long ago, someone died here, a woman. She was angry." "Angry?" I pressed. "Who was she?" Mrs. Nguyen's hands stilled. Don't ask too much. Don't stay up too late. And don't open your door at night. She resumed chopping, the rhythm unnervingly steady. I couldn't let it go. I started researching the house's history. The New York Public Library had old records, and after hours of digging, I found it. A newspaper clipping from 1973. A Vietnamese immigrant, Linh Pham, had lived in the boarding house. She'd been a seamstress, working late into the night to support her family. One night, she vanished. The police found her sewing machine still running, a half-finished dress on the table, but no sign of her. The case went cold. The article mentioned rumors. Neighbors claimed Linh had been haunted by a ma quai, a Vietnamese ghost, born of rage or injustice. Some said she'd been cursed, others that she'd made a deal with something dark to survive her hardships. Either way, her disappearance left a stain on the house. Tenants reported strange occurrences for years after. Back at the house, things got worse. The footsteps grew louder, more insistent, as if something was trying to get in. One night, I woke to the sound of scratching, slow, deliberate, like nails dragging across wood. It was coming from the ceiling. I stared up, frozen, as the sound circled above me, then stopped directly over my bed. The next morning, I found scratches on the ceiling, deep, jagged marks that hadn't been there before. I showed Marcus, the artist, who lived on the third floor. He was a gaunt man with haunted eyes, always sketching grotesque figures in his notebook. "You're not imagining it," he said, his voice low. "I've seen her, in the mirrors. She's not human anymore." "Her?" I asked. He didn't answer, just handed me one of his sketches. It was a woman, her face half hidden by long, matted hair, her eyes hollow and black. Her hands were unnaturally long, fingers curled like claws. I felt a chill, recognizing the jasmine scent from the hallway. That night, I set up my phone to record while I slept. At 2:47 a.m., the footage showed static, then a faint shape moving across the room. It was tall, hunched, its movements jerky, like a puppet on broken strings. The audio picked up a whisper, soft but clear. "Ji huak o lai mai mai. Go, or stay forever." I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know what I was dealing with. I remembered a Vietnamese ritual my mother had told me about, back when I was a kid visiting relatives in Hanoi. To appease an Oan Han, an unquiet spirit, you offer it something it lost in life. Linh had been a seamstress, so I bought a spool of red thread and a needle, symbols of her trade. At midnight, I sat in my room, the thread and needle on the floor, and spoke her name. "Linh Pham," I said, my voice trembling. "I know you're here. I want to help you." The air grew heavy, the temperature plummeting. The lights flickered, and the jasmine smell returned, sharper now, almost suffocating. Then I heard it, a low guttural moan, rising into a scream that shook the walls. The door rattled violently, as if something was trying to break through. I held my ground, clutching the thread. "Take this," I said. "Find peace." The screaming stopped, replaced by a silence so deep it felt like the world had paused. Then slowly, the thread began to unravel, spooling across the floor as if pulled by invisible hands. The window burst open, and a gust of wind tore through the room. In the moonlight, I saw her, Linh, or what was left of her. Her face was a mask of anguish, her eyes black voids. She reached for the thread, her fingers brushing mine. They were cold, impossibly cold, like death itself. And then she was gone. The thread lay still, the needle beside it. The air warmed and the jasmine scent faded. The house was different after that. The footsteps stopped, the cold lifted, and the scratches on the ceiling began to fade. Claire said she slept better, and Marcus stopped sketching nightmares. Mrs. Yin never spoke of it, but she gave me a small nod when I passed her in the hall, as if she knew. I kept digging into Lynn's story. A distant cousin, still living in Brooklyn, told me Lynn had been betrayed by someone she trusted. A lover, maybe, or a business partner. The betrayal had driven her to despair, and her death, whatever its cause, had bound her to the house. The ritual, it seemed, had given her enough peace to move on. But I'm not so sure. Some nights when the city is quiet, I still feel a chill. I still smell jasmine, faint but unmistakable. And sometimes in the corner of my eye, I see a shadow move. So that's my story. The boarding house on Bleecker Street, where I met a ghost and lived to tell the tale. But what about you? Have you ever felt something watching you in the dark? Something that knows your name? If you've got a story, share it below. I read everyone. And if you want to hear more, stick around. Next time, I'll tell you about the thing I saw in the subway tunnel under Grand Central. Something that wasn't human and definitely wasn't dead. My name is Mr. Nightwraith, and I'm not just a horror writer. I'm someone who survived an experience that tainted every word I've written ever since with the color of true fear. I've never been fond of flying. Working in New York, I usually travel by train or car, avoiding the hollow feeling between layers of cold clouds. But that night, a late October night, I had to fly urgently to Chicago to meet a witness for my new novel. The only available flight, Flight 377, departure time 11:45 p.m., operated by a little-known airline, Northwind Air. There was a strange note on the ticket. Fly the original route, no diversion under any circumstances. I thought it was a humorous tagline, but later I wished I had never boarded that plane. The airport was eerily empty. No lines of passengers, no children's voices, not even background music from the boarding gate. Only a slow, solitary announcement echoed through the hallway. Passenger on Flight 377, please proceed to Gate 9. I boarded an old Boeing 737, cracked leather seats, flickering cabin lights. There were only 8 passengers, no one talking, their eyes hollow as if they weren't alive. I felt a chill as I sat in seat 12A, right by the window. The head flight attendant, a pale middle-aged woman with deep-set eyes, approached and handed me a small note. If you hear a knock outside the window at cruising altitude, don't turn around. I scoffed, assuming it was just Halloween ambiance. But the first sound came right as we reached cruising altitude. A soft, steady knock-knock. Right outside the window, next to my head. Mid-air. The knock-knock outside the window stopped after a few minutes, but the cold didn't. I pulled the thin blanket over myself, trying to convince myself it was just some wing vibration or equipment noise. But the real discomfort came from something else. The air in the cabin, completely silent. No whispers, no rustling of newspapers, no button presses. I turned my head slightly. The other passengers all sat upright, unmoving, as if they had been frozen mid-seat. I tried to stand, stepping into the aisle. But as I brushed past the man in seat 11C, I realized something was wrong. His skin was ice cold, and his eyes were wide open, staring straight ahead. Unblinking. I instinctively pulled back. My head spun. This is the Flight 377 crew. We are entering a space turbulence zone. Please remain seated and fasten your seatbelt. The voice from the intercom. But strangely, the voice didn't sound human. It was raspy, layered with distorted tones, like something trying to imitate a person. I headed to the back, looking for the head flight attendant. But the rear cabin, where the restrooms and storage were, pitch black. No one there. Then I heard a whisper. "You're the only one still alive." I spun around. No one. I clearly heard it, whispered right into my ear. But when I turned, there was only the emergency light flickering. I rushed back to my seat. Each step echoed like I was walking alone in an abandoned house, as if no one else remained on this plane. When I sat down, I noticed the seat next to me, previously empty, now had someone in it. A girl in a long-sleeve shirt, hair covering her face. She didn't look at me, didn't move, just sat there, as if she had always been there. I was certain the seat had been empty when I boarded. "Excuse me, when did you board the plane?" I asked, voice shaking. No response. I gently touched her shoulder. Ice cold. She slowly turned her head, and I'll never forget that face. No eyes, no nose, just pale skin stretched over a featureless face. I screamed, unbuckled, backed away from the seat. When I turned back again, she was gone. The intercom crackled again, this time with a different voice, my own. "Mr. Nightwraith, return to your seat. This is the last story you'll ever write." The cabin lights all went out. Only a red emergency glow remained by the exit. I looked out the window. In the pitch black sky, a figure was clinging to the outside of the plane. It couldn't be a person. At this altitude, the air is thin, the pressure deadly, but the shadow was there, pressed to the glass and tapping, one knock at a time. Knock, knock. I was almost losing it. Breathing heavily, trembling, I looked for the flight attendant call button. All dead. The flickering cabin light left only a single eerie green line down the aisle. I tried my phone, no signal. My wristwatch stopped at 12:03, 3 minutes past midnight, and from that moment on, every device was frozen. Nothing worked, no engine sound. The plane seemed to no longer be flying. I rushed to the cockpit door, pounding on the steel. No response. I finally pushed it open. And to my horror, the cockpit was empty. No pilots, no lit control panels, no signs the aircraft was operating. But outside, I saw a dark tunnel stretching infinitely, where the sky should be. I began to understand this wasn't a normal flight anymore. I was floating in a dimension humans don't belong in. From behind me, a voice spoke. Someone opened that door once, and he never came back. An old man stood there, not a pilot, not a passenger. He wore an old flight crew uniform, hair ghost white, wrinkled skin. On his wrist was a Flight 377 ticket, same as mine. "You're the new one," he said, unblinking. At first, I thought this was just a late flight too. I backed away. "What the hell is going on?" "We're no longer in human airspace," he said, pointing to the void outside. "Flight 377 is a forgotten flight." I didn't understand. I stammered, "What do you mean?" Years ago, on the night of October 31st, a Northwind Air flight departed from New York. It never arrived. No signals, no wreckage. That flight was this plane. I felt my blood freeze. Then, the passengers, crew, they're still here, but not how you think. At that moment, the cabin lights all turned on. I turned back, horrified to see all passengers were gone. No, not gone. They had stood up, but not like the living. Their bodies slouched, staggered, eyes wide, empty, mouths grinning unnaturally wide, each one walking toward me. "This flight needs a replacement," he whispered into my ear. a living person, to keep it flying forever. I backed into the cockpit wall. I don't belong here. You took seat 12A. That means you can't leave. I pulled out my ticket, but instead of my name, it now had a single scrawled line: The Last Storyteller. I looked back. The faceless girl crawled on all fours through the aisle, head tilted sideways, hair dragging the floor. From the intercom came a drawn-out voice from hell. "Passenger Mr. Nightwraith, it's time to stay." The plane shook, the window cracked, and outside, that thing clinging to the aircraft began clawing the frame, its red eyes sliding across the glass. I turned. All passengers now surrounded me. No escape. Suddenly, my phone lit up. No signal, no Wi-Fi, but the screen showed a repeating message. "Write. Rewrite this story. That's the only way out." As I typed the first words into my notes app, the ghost stopped. Everything paused. The red light faded. The plane steadied. I found myself back in seat 12A, phone in hand, writing every detail of the nightmare I was living. The intercom clicked back, now a normal human voice. "We're preparing to land in Chicago. Please fasten your seatbelt." I looked around, everyone seated calmly. No one remembered anything. No one sensed anything wrong. The plane landed at 3:33 a.m., 2 hours late, but on the schedule board, Flight 377 was never listed as departed. I stepped off the plane, 3:33 a.m. Everything seemed normal, but I knew what I had been through was real. I asked the gate agent, "What time did Flight 377 land?" She glanced at her screen, answered, "I'm sorry, sir. That flight was canceled 8 years ago." I froze. Days later, I returned to New York. At my desk, I opened my laptop to document everything, not for publication, but as proof. But when I saved the file, the name auto-filled as "Next Flight, Seat 12A." My phone buzzed. An email with no sender appeared. "Thanks for keeping your word. Next time, bring a notebook. There'll be no signal on the next journey." That night, I looked up at the New York sky. A plane passed overhead, silent, no blinking lights. And I swear I heard a faint knock, knock from above. Have you ever wondered, the flight you're on, does it really belong to this world?